So today's going to be the story about how I became a software developer without any degrees or formal training or any sort of schooling at all to do with development. It started back in, I'd say, 2011 when I first got into development or had my first experience of coding. Met my uncle in south of France and he showed me Pygame and Linux, and this sort of opened a door to me of trying to see how games were made and be interested into how things work. So the first thing that I remember creating is a snake sort of prototype, and I've had a look at the code now and it's bloody awful. I've tried to play with it and yeah, it runs, but there's nothing to it. You move around, it moves automatically and so on and so forth, as snakes should go, but you pick up they would be apples and your snake doesn't grow. But at the time I was like, wow, I've got something moving on a screen. So I came back to the UK and I kind of didn't do anything. I went back to school, and at the time all I cared about was video games, and that was about it really. So I think at school we only had HTML and CSS lessons, like 3 of them, so there was no sort of push for me to learn any coding. I didn't see me doing it as a job. I wasn't the best at maths. So I finished school and I flew out to Thailand again to meet my uncle and work for him for a bit. I worked as a QA at his company, and it introduced me more to Python, but down the road of Django. This was quite good for me. It put me in the deep end. It put me in working with a team, especially with a team that didn't know the great English. So we had to really sort of work hard to work together, and it was a good learning experience, I'd say, for me, and it taught me quite a lot. And the first project he set me was to make a Mandelbrot, which I wrote in Python, and I needed a lot of his assistance to make this work. And I think that it helped me learn, but it also put a dampener on how I felt about my own ability. And this has carried on through the years, but I think this is something everyone goes through as a developer, is you don't feel like you have the ability. So again, came back to the UK, went to college, didn't do anything with IT. Well, I did IT, but it was more server management, fixing PCs, but I also did business, geography and French. So at this time I did not plan on going forward with development. Again, it was just a hobby, it was something I did. I think during college I only made 3 projects. One of them was One of them was a passwords generator, which was god awful and should never be used by anyone. It's so unsecure. Another was a file sending process, so one PC is the host, another is the receiver, and you can send files. Now that I found pretty cool, just to be able to send a file from one PC to another with something I'd written. Again, super unsecure and should never be used by anyone. And the third one was something I was quite proud of. I wrote a reminder app in the console, but I upgraded it using Tkinter to be a GUI, and it was quite interesting because you type in your reminder, press alright, remind me in 5 minutes, and then it pops up in the front of your screen and reminds you of whatever it was. And I found that quite interesting because it was something, it didn't have to be secure, it could just work. And yeah, I was quite proud of that one. But I never saw this progressing. It was just, oh, that's quite cool. So I think towards the end of college I was planning on dropping out to join the Navy. To cut a long story short there, didn't get in, bad eyesight, so I thought, what will I do now? So I took an apprenticeship in creative design, so I quite liked photography. So did an apprenticeship there, was working at the same time at this place where we go around to independent businesses, take photos and put them on our website. But this sort of pushed me towards learning WordPress, which I thought was incredible at the time, how you can make a nice looking website so easily. Now don't get me wrong, you can also make a very crap looking website very easily, but we were aiming for the nicer side. But I wanted to learn, how can I improve my site without using plugins? So I started to learn a bit of PHP, JavaScript. They were all crap, but it was the fact that I still made something that could have worked if I put more time and effort into it, but that wasn't the main part of my job. So towards the end of my apprenticeship, I actually got in touch with a guy that I went to school with, and he said that the business next to him that his dad works with were looking for someone to be a software developer. So I thought, you know what, let's just go for it, see what happens. So I applied for the job, and they weren't hiring at the time, but I waited for 3 months and then checked again, and they were this time. So I went for an interview, had my first interview, which was just a talking generic interview, and then a couple of days later I got an email saying, thank you, yes, you're through to the next stage, here's your technical assessment. It's like, what the hell's this? Why have I got a quiz? And this was my first experience of having a project that I had to do for an interview, and it was to make a ASP.NET with VB.NET, a web app that you can log into and check the stock of the warehouse, and all that data should be in a SQL database. And I sat there and just thought, I have no experience with SQL, no experience with VB.NET, and no experience with ASP. I've just got a bit of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript under my belt. But anyway, I sat there and my naive self thought, yeah, how hard can this be? Turns out not that difficult if you do a web form, which is mainly drag and drop, and not a web form, sorry, like just a normal desktop form, which is just drag and dropping everything on. So I went into the interview, showed them this, and they were like, yeah, we asked for a web app. Somehow, like, I managed to still get the job. So I worked there for a year. We were mainly working with VB.NET, had a bit of C# here and there, and I really got thrown in the deep end because I was going to be working with client tickets. So I had to learn very quickly to make sure I was on the help desk as quick as possible, which I think was very good for me because I had no choice but to learn and no choice but to improve. So my next job was working for the client of my last place. They took all their software in-house, took me with them. Again, exact same stuff as the previous job, so I'll skip over this one. And then I went for my current job, which had another technical interview. It was a written one this time, and I didn't fully understand the terminology on the form, but I knew what the code meant. So instead of just writing any old crap on the test, I decided to leave it and just speak about it. And I think that helped me. I think that's something to learn as a self-taught software developer, that you don't always know everything, and you don't need to. As long as you're good and efficient at what you do, then you don't need to have all the technical knowledge, as long as you can work, really. And I think it's all about, it's like a trade. The longer you do it, the more you learn and the better you get. And that's how I went from being a junior to a mid-level in 3 years. It's about growth and learning and constantly pushing yourself. So yeah, that's been my journey. Please comment if you liked the video, like if you liked, dislike if you didn't, and I'll see you again next time.